Good afternoon, everyone in the UK. Good morning to everyone joining us from Brazil. It is my great pleasure to open this webinar on digital assets in Brazil, organized by the Financial Service Committee of the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce in Great Britain, led by Simon Davies. Simon, we are, as always, very grateful for all the work and thoughtfulness that you put into the excellent events that you organize for the Chamber. Thank you. I would also like to thank our guest speaker today, Pedro Eroles. Pedro, welcome back to one of our webinars. We are delighted to have you with us. Pedro, who is the founding partner of Eroles Advogados, is indeed widely recognized as one of Brazil's leading payments and digital finance regulatory lawyers. The provision of digital asset service in Brazil is principally regulated by a law of 2022 and by very recent central bank regulations. As I believe it is the case with banking regulations in general in Brazil, they focus on security, transparency, and the prevention of money laundering. And today, Pedro will be sharing with us his insights on the new Brazilian legislation on digital assets. In doing that, he will be in a dialogue with Simon Davies, who also has extensive experience in this area. Indeed, Simon works as key advisor to Checker Finance, also being the proprietor of Zappy Technologies and former managing director of EBANX in London, and thus does have extensive experience on this matter too. So to both of you, Simon and Dave and Pedro, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us today. And now, just before I ask Simon to please open our webinar, I would like to note that we will have a Q&A session today, and questions can be asked via the Teams chat box. So please feel free to send us to our speakers during the whole webinar. And now, without further ado, I would like to invite Simon to please start our works.
Thanks, Mara. And good afternoon or good morning to everyone. Brazil is a country which has embraced financial services, financial technology, and indeed financial regulation. And I think that most of us are aware of the incredible success of products like PIX, which was introduced by the Brazilian Central Bank in 2019, and the huge inroads that have been made in advancing financial inclusivity. So the purpose of our conversation today is to talk about changes and developments and regulation in the world of digital services and digital payments, an area, again, where Brazil has seen some extraordinary growth. And I'm joined in conversation by someone who knows far more than I do about Brazilian financial services regulation and digital payments, in Pedro Eroles, who I've known for the past 7 or 8 years. And Vera has already given a great introduction to Pedro and also taught something about my own skills. So she also mentioned the fact that if anybody's got any questions, please put them on the chat, then we can bring them up. The way we're going to handle today, it's just going to be a sort of a conversation between us. We're going to be talking, and sharing knowledge. And if you've got any questions, please bring them up and I'll introduce them into the conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to ask you, Pedro. My first question really is it true to say that the measures recently introduced provide a licensing regime for virtual asset finance providers that imposes similar levels of governance, capital, and compliance obligations that those enjoyed by traditional financial institutions? Is that what it's about, or is there more to it than this?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Val and Simon, for the invitation, and good morning, good afternoon for everyone. here. Very glad to be here with you today. Well, this question takes us to first, to approach this question is important to understand that there are different levels of institutions in Brazil. So it goes from big banks, the biggest banks in Brazil, until to the smaller fintechs, authorized fintechs, payment institutions. So the level of regulatory burden and supervision by the central bank, it varies uh, depending on the institution. What happened recently is that there was a level of institutions, so to speak. So the simplest institutions, the SCDs, the direct credit companies, and the payment institutions, that the central bank realized that they were not properly supervised and regulated. So there was then uh, um, a movement from the central bank to level up the scrutiny and the requirements on such institutions. So we can mention in this sense the new regulatory requirements of minimum capital stock and net equity demanded from all institutions. And I can mention an example. Usually, a payments institution could operate with a 2 million reais, approximately $400,000, 400,000 US dollars, could operate in the country. This minimum capital was raised to a minimum of an average 14 million, so 7 times more, given the new regulation. Of course, this impacts mostly these smaller institutions because the biggest institutions already have, in principle, this minimum capital stock and minimum net equity. So when we see the regulation addressed to uh, uh, the VISPs, the virtual asset service providers in Brazil, the intention was uh, to bring them to a scope of regulation and supervision very similar to those applicable to payment institutions and the smallest institutions, not to the biggest financial institutions. Of course, uh, there is, and we are seeing this in Brazil, that many players that, in principle, if we go 5 or 10 years ago, we see that many players that at first refused or fought against the growth of crypto activities in Brazil now are joining this market because now they are regulated. So we see the big banks joining the crypto activities, and also other institutional players such as Nubank, for instance, or Mercado Pago. But the idea of the central bank is to create a level playing field in which we have a strong regulation specifically to circumvent or to curb the most frequent problems related to crypto activities, such as money laundering, cybersecurity problems, and custody problems, because we had also this notes in many jurisdictions, people that had the 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 loss of their private keys and then they lost all the investment, and also other aspects as well, such as transparency in investments, suitability, so on and so forth.
So there are two things that come from there, Pedro. And you talk about leveling up and a level playing field. Obviously, this level playing field, there's two things I'm going to ask you about. The first thing is costs. Um, a lot of companies have been working in the digital space have not, haven't had the same cost burden as regulated institutions. Do you see that this cost burden is going to impact them?
In my opinion, yes. Uh, Also, taking again the example of payment institutions, which I think it's a good similarity of what happened in Brazil. The movement that began in 2013, when we had our payments law enacted in the country. Uh, since then, we have a huge growth of payment institutions, even the regulated ones, because many of them could operate without a license, or could operate up to certain thresholds, and there was a problem of supervision by the central bank, as well as other problems. The licenses were easier to be obtained than they will be uh, uh, today. So given that many of these players were operating without any license in Brazil, so many, for instance, were operating from abroad. If you see some virtual asset service providers, they were operating on a cross-border basis in Brazil.
Yeah.
So there was this aspect that many players came to Brazil to uh, take advantage of the lack of regulation, and especially if we see another front of the crypto regulation, which is parallel to the VISPs, which is the FX transactions with crypto assets. Many players came to Brazil to take advantage of performing this sort of cross-border transactions without the need of performing an FX transaction, which is restricted to be performed with FX authorized institutions in Brazil, and also the to avoid taxation.
Yeah,
So
that was the
there,
second thing I was going to come on and ask you about in terms of leveling up. So, one of the big things, of course, is the treatment of IOF. So perhaps you can enlighten us about what's happening there, because a lot of people have been taking advantage of, a lot of players have been taking advantage of the fact that IOF has not been treated in the same level way.
yes, apart from the we had there was besides this crypto law, we had also 1 year before a new FX law enacted in Brazil, uh, uh, which changed a lot of aspects of bureaucratic aspects of our FX framework in Brazil. So apart from all the bureaucratic aspects of an FX transaction in Brazil, there's also the costs involved. And one of the costs involved is the IOF, is the tax on financial transactions, which is a multi-faced uh, 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 tax. It is levied from credit transactions, from insurance transactions, but also from FX transactions. The point is that we need the same principle that applies to in the United States and other jurisdictions of no taxation without representation, which is basically the principle of legality in tax. It also applies to IOF. And we have a law in Brazil that sets forth that the tax on FX transactions can be levied on FX transactions performed with fiat currency. So the exchange of fiat currency against fiat currency. So as far as we do not have this definition applicable to crypto assets, or in other words, we don't have crypto assets or stable coins falling under this definition of fiat currency, not even financially or especially legally, we don't have the basis, and I mean the tax authorities, do not have the basis to levy taxes on cross-border transactions performed with stable coins, for instance. So this created along with the lack of regulation, which changed recently due to the new regulation of crypto assets, and also with respect to FX transactions with crypto assets, this changed from a regulatory perspective, but it is also it's still pending of change from a tax perspective in Brazil, but this is just to exemplify how this regulatory arbitrage and the advantages of the lack of regulation was a great advantages for those who were establishing themselves to perform crypto activities in Brazil so far.
Yeah, do you see, I mean, with this, do you see that this change, and you know, this removing of this unjust treatment, do you see that if this will reshape the cross-border payment model or treasury strategies for fintechs or corporates currently operating in Brazil, or is it going to stay largely the same, do you think?
I think the crypto activity in general will change in Brazil. This is, of course, my opinion. I am not basing this in a study because we are still the just to give to take a step back. The new regulation came into force in February the 2nd, so it's still being implemented. The VISPs are preparing their license authorizations with the central bank. So
Yeah, they have a transitional period, don't they?
yeah, they have the transitional period. So the actual consequences of the implementation of the rules are still to be seen. But in my opinion, what will happen is the change of the crypto activity in Brazil, both from uh, 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 from the client perspective and from I think from three perspectives: from the perspective of the players that will operate in this market, the clients that will invest in crypto and use crypto, and also from the perspective of the investors. The investors, I mean, those who will invest to create new crypto businesses in Brazil.
Okay.
From a client perspective, I think the regulation will bring for sure, in my perspective, credibility for the market, because as far as you have a stamp of the central bank uh, uh, stating that this is a regulated activity, this is being supervised by the central bank, this of course creates, and you have a transparency, and you have the website of the central bank in which any customer in Brazil can withdraw a lot of information, and you have the supervisory supervision area of the central bank. So this creates credibility for the investors in Brazil. Uh, in the perspective of the players, I think they will change because the smaller players, those players, I'm not even saying about the players that came to Brazil to for illicit acts. This is another aspect. But let's say those that came to Brazil to take advantage of regulatory arbitrage or the advantages of the lack of regulation. I think uh, uh, this tends to be discontinued. So these players will go away or be acquired by another bigger players because the regulatory burden in Brazil is increasing. As I mentioned, there is this regulatory capital rules that, by the way, they are also applicable to VISPs. So we have this regulatory burden that is becoming more and more heavy in Brazil. So I think these smaller players with not so attractive business models will tend to leave the country or be acquired or try to do something else. Uh, but I think the institutional players will uh, will grow. So we are seeing this in Brazil. We have the big banks, see, for instance, Bradesco and Itaú, which in the beginning of this crypto market in Brazil, they were against crypto activities. By the way, the central bank was against crypto activities in the beginning as well. This changed a lot from 2014 to this year. So in this 10-year, 12 years period, it basically had a 180 degrees change in the country. So I think big players will also and more explore this market to offer products related to crypto to the clients. And finally, in the investor, so I mean the investors that want to establish businesses in Brazil, I think the regulation will also bring the same credibility that it brings to the clients will bring to the investors, because let's say you are a big uh, investment fund from the United States. Uh, of course, if you have a regulated activity rather than a non-regulated activity, that can create a lot of problems. Of course, that regulated activity brings more credibility for institutional investors in the country. So, in this aspect, I think the market will change a lot in the medium to long term.
Okay, that's. I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, about new businesses, and also you touched on the role of BaSen in this. So it looks to me like we could expect some rationalization. But given the role of BaSen, given the instrumental um, role that they have, for example, with the introduction of PICs, can we expect to see a future interaction between them embracing nowadays the world of stablecoins, for example, and fiat payments rails? Can we see PICs and stablecoins in some way working together?
In my opinion, I don't think so, Simon. This, of course, is my opinion. Of course, this is open to debate, but PIX is a domestic payment scheme. Of course, we have now PIX in Argentina. I assist the client to structure PIX in Argentina, but it's not actually PIX. This is a PIX with a structure of FX transaction in which we use an intermediary called EFX service provider in Brazil. But PIX is basically an FX transaction. And when we see crypto activities in Brazil, this following the market as a lawyer and of course as a curious of all the other aspects that circle the market as the financial economic aspects and market aspects, In my opinion, I saw from a domestic perspective, crypto being used more as an investment product rather than a payment product from a domestic perspective. So if we see people using crypto or searching for crypto in Brazil, they were searching much more in the sense of uh, in the sense of uh, in the sense of investing in crypto to uh, expecting that uh, their position increases and then to settle their position and gain with the delta, the difference. From a cross-border basis, on the other hand, we saw a lot of stable coins being used to perform cross-border payments. So uh, answering your question, I think when we see stablecoin and PIX, I see, and then we go to another project of the central bank that's now stopped, which is the CBDC project,
Yeah,
the
the
central
Drex,
bank,
yeah.
the DREX. The underlying technology of DREX is the same technology of stable coins and crypto, is a distributed ledger. I think this technology, uh, envisaging a scenario in which DREX is implemented, this can interact with PIX, in my perspective, to turn possible cross-border payments that among jurisdictions, and then we will need the interoperability and maybe in international treaties. This comes with more efforts, but from a domestic perspective, I don't see, as far as I can see it, stable coins and PIX interacting, apart from, of course, some products that can be outlined using the two products, but not one really enhancing the capabilities of the other in the way that, for instance, you can see open finance interacting with PIX. For instance, when we see the 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 use of open finance to make payments using PIX, and for instance, how can we can what we can envisage with CBDC project implemented in Brazil, and this interacting with the FX law to allow more cost-effective FX transactions.
Yeah, I know that you're something of an expert on open finance, and indeed you have authored a book on it. And I understand that that book will shortly be available in English if anybody is, people who are interested in it. But which would be great. But can you just expand a little bit upon, how do you see crypto services joining the open finance ecosystem?
Sure. We are, well, I think it's worth mentioning a little bit of, I mentioned this 10 years, 12 years history of the crypto activities in Brazil. And I think it's worth mentioning that uh, I think that one interesting perspective in which we can analyze it is the perspective of the regulator of the central bank. So, uh, and for this purpose, I call the attention for two circulars of the central bank, one of 2014 and one of 2017. So we are talking about 10, 12 years, not a long time, in which basically the central bank sets forth all the problems and negative aspects related to crypto activity. So it's being used by money laundering. It can be used. You can lose all your investments. It's not a fiat currency. So basically, is almost it was not a red flag specifically, but it was a yellow flag,
Mm.
and a really a special yellow flag because it was circulated to all the market. In these communications, the central bank didn't forbid the didn't prohibited the crypto activities, but they said we are observing, and when and if they turn to be something that can potentially harm the financial system, then we'll take action. So basically, it was a yellow flag, and then this was by the time of Ilan Goldfein, our president of the central bank, prior to Roberto Campos Neto and prior to Gabriel Galípolo, which is the current uh, president of the central bank. So in this sense, this started to change bit by bit. I will mention that because there are so many years ago, but I was, as a lawyer, I was hired by some banks in which for a work in which they were trying to argue to the central bank all the negative aspects of crypto activities and why the central bank should take action. So it's not only a negative vision from the central bank, but also from the incumbents, so to speak. And then this start to change and change and change. Then we have the crypto law, and then and now we have all the regulation. So uh, um, so sorry, Simon, you may ask a question and I started to make all this history.
Too many thoughts going through your head, but what we were talking about open finance and how it would all come together eventually at the end of the day, which is
so the idea of, and I talked all that because now crypto is a regulated activity. It's in its beginning. So the idea is that financial institutions and big institutions will offer them, and they started already to offer them. Nubank is offering crypto products. Itaú, Bradesco, so one of the biggest banks. Nubank now is a big player in Brazil. They are offering crypto products. So the idea is that open finance will encompass all the regulated products within its ecosystem. So it has not been encompassed yet, but this is the next step for sure.
so you see it's going to be complementary rather than competitive to the existing financial service products, range of products, banking networks, etc. You see it very much as a complementary product,
Yes.
adding to, not taking away. Because, I mean, obviously, one of the concerns about regulation is that it's going to reduce competition. It's going to reduce the number of people offering products. It's going to impose cost, as we've discussed. It's going to impose a lot of cost and a lot of reporting requirements, investment in technology onto companies, all of whom, some of whom are more able to afford it than others, and consequently, we will see a rationalization. That's what I'm trying to understand. Do you see it as competitive, complementary, converging? Does it have a future?
Yes. Well, we can try to picture that as following: the door to enter the regulated circle is narrower now. So it's more difficult, will be to jump this barrier, will be more difficult now for entities. But as soon as you join this regulated circle, then all the products will be available. And for instance, we were talking about open finance. Open finance is an infrastructure to foster competition. And as soon as you have crypto products, the idea is that you can offer them to your clients, but the clients of other institutions could also access your crypto products. This is within the open finance structure. So it doesn't change a lot. It changes the aspect that the circle, the door to enter the regulated circle is narrower, is harder now. But when you enter, everything will be available. PIX, open finance, crypto, everything.
Cool. Okay. So, from what I can see, we're going to have a system where we will be reducing consumer protection. Sorry, we will be increasing consumer protection. We will be reducing regulatory arbitrage. And also, with the involvement of the central bank, we can see that there will be support for innovation in payments. And I presume also in tokenization and blockchain. Would you like to opine on those aspects of it as well?
Yes, tokenization is, well, tokenization is another front, because when we talk about tokenization, of course we can speak about the underlying technology of tokenization within the crypto sphere. But in principle, when we are talking about tokenization, we are talking about tokenization of financial instruments or other financial instruments. For instance, you can tokenize a debenture or a share, uh, or CCB, which is a credit instrument in Brazil. These front of the tokenization was would be advanced very much with the Drex project. And the Drex project, as far as I'm concerned, stopped or is walking in slow paces in the central bank. Due to all the aspects that you were seeing in the news, the master case, everything, there's a lot of things going in the central bank and other priorities now. But this is for sure a very promising project within the central bank. And the idea is that players and probably the private sector will try to foster these initiatives using what has been already developed within the Drex project that was being discussed in the central bank. Because, as I mentioned, the technology, you mentioned, Simon, blockchain and blockchain and all the other distributed ledger technologies is the underlying technology of Drex. So basically, much of the path that has been walked will be used for other instruments, but differently from crypto, because crypto, for a long time before the regulation, there was a market being developed outside the regulatory scope. There was no law, there was no competence of the central bank. There was those communications that I mentioned, but they were more negative. They didn't curb the market really, because there was a market being developed in the country since then. But differently from crypto, when we speak about tokenized instruments, they need to be developed within the regulated scope, because we are talking about regulated instruments, debentures and CCBs, instruments from receivables, so instruments that are issued and negotiated by the traditional market, so to speak.
Okay. Well, that sounds like an exciting time. I just also, whilst take the opportunity, whilst I'm very happy firing questions at you, if anybody else who's on the call would like or has specific questions, please don't hesitate to put them up on the chat, because it would be nice to get a few questions from people who are thinking perhaps a little bit differently than I am. So, I mean, my own opinion, Brazil has been extraordinarily successful in digital payments. PIX has worked wonders in terms of financial inclusivity. It seems to me that this is a very serious attempt in order to tackle something that has been troubling many regulators in financial services markets throughout the world, which is how to regulate crypto without suppressing it entirely. And to, I mean, I say crypto, digital payments, digital services, however you want to put it, because in Brazil, certainly it has been embraced, and I think it has been embraced for a number of reasons. And you've talked about some of the more nefarious risks involved in financial services. All of us who work in financial services, we're acutely aware of money laundering and the fact that even the best intentioned of financial payment networks can be hijacked by those with a criminal agenda, or those seeking to route payments into sanctioned countries, for example. So it is, I think this is a really good first step. I mean, do you see that this is going to? Do you see a good future in Brazil? Do you see the same future as before? Do you see a future that is, you know, good, positive, going in the right direction, but more controlled? What's your own feeling from your expert point of view, and your relationship? I know that you also work with the central bank. What's your own view about that, where it's taking us?
Yes, just to mention, I think a friend of mine, I will not mention her name because I'll not highlight her, just sent me a news here that three exchanges are leaving the country, to crypto exchanges, just to highlight the aspect that I mentioned, that
Yeah.
the regulation will turn the door narrower. About your question, Simon, in my opinion, the central bank uh, has developed a great role in Brazil to develop the market, but the problem of Brazil is not the central bank of the financial innovation. We have a very serious ethical problem in Brazil. So when the central bank took the steps to curb the problems that was occurring with the payments institutions in Brazil, and there was the Faria Lima case. Of course, this was a problem, but what was behind it? It was not just some uh, small thieves that were trying to take advantage. No, it was
Yeah.
the organized crime in Brazil, the
Yeah.
PCC and the Red Command. We have the ethical problems. You see the master case, which is the biggest scandal in Brazil. It's in all newspapers. You or
Yeah.
all the audience from UK, you are seeing that. It highlighted a very big problem in Brazil because
At
it
all levels. I mean, up to the
the,
judiciary.
it's not see, it's important to emphasize it's not a small judge, it's a small city in Brazil. No, it's the Supreme Court of Brazil. So what the central bank actually, there was an attempt of the Congress to uh, to 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 create troubles to the central bank to do their job against master case. So we have very serious problems that are beyond the scope of the central bank. We have the capacity problem of the central bank, of course, but we have problems in in all levels.
Capacity is a problem with all regulators, isn't it, currently, Pedro? I mean, with the fast-moving world of financial services, the introduction of new products, the demands, and also the protection of the consumers and the vulnerability of consumers, the world changing geopolitics. I mean, our regulators, all of them, are extraordinarily highly stretched, aren't they, currently?
Yes, yes, they are. But given the capacity of the central bank, they did a sort of miracle to to say the least, because all the projects that were advanced, they were winning the prizes of best central bank of the world again and again, and all these problems going on. But uh, when we see master case later today, we will talk about a project of a bill of law that's being discussed in the Congress, and those that are Brazilian here hearing us will understand what I say, because here in Brazil we have a saying that I don't know how to translate it, but that Brazilians always do things after they happen, because there's a bill being discussed in Brazil, with the Bill of Law 281, which intends to reform all the resolution regimes that were enacted in Brazil. Uh, the first was enacted in 1974. And after the global crisis of financial crisis of 2008, we had uh, some guidelines set forth by the Financial Stability Board, intending to reform the resolution regimes in Brazil. This in 2011. In 2019, so 8 years after that, there was a bill of law proposed in the Congress. It was stopped there. And now all the master case happened. And what happened? Now let's see the
Let's
project that,
resurrect it. Yeah.
wow, why didn't you do it before it happened? Because it could avoid a lot of things. Or it would not avoid everything, but it could mitigate at least.
Yeah, we call it
Um,
shutting the stable door after the horse has gone in English, which is
Good. Learn
yeah
a new idiom.
a
Great.
new
A new
idiomatic expression. But I don't.
idiomatic
I
expression.
like to translate these idiomatic expressions, but I think sometimes they just don't work. But no,
Yeah.
I've got another. There's a question from Luis Galval who's asked us, and it's an interesting one because it's one that came to my mind. What concrete criteria should be used to determine when a foreign virtual asset service provider is effectively operating in Brazil and therefore should be subject to local licensing requirements by the Central Bank of Brazil? In that context, would elements such as marketing or a website in Portuguese be enough to trigger regulatory jurisdiction or oversight?
Yeah, this is a very good question,
Yeah.
Luis.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's important to define if this crypto is a crypto security token, or no, a non-security token. If it's a security token, so if it is a security or a valor mobiliário in Brazil, then we have clearer, they are not altogether clear, but there are clearer guidelines from the Brazilian Securities Commission in with respect of what defines a cross-border activity in Brazil. As to the crypto activity, there are not much guideline in with respect to the crypto activity in the regulation issued by the central bank. We have two criteria. One is the activities performed on a cross-border basis, and another if you have an establishment in Brazil. But this is a good question. What would be the activity? Only the marketing, only the offering? Um, and we have the two extreme cases. If you are really offering the product to Brazilian clients, then I understand that for sure you have a crypto activity in Brazil. If your clients are looking after looking for you for your products on a reverse solicitation basis, for me is a clear case in which you are not performing crypto activities in Brazil. But then we have all the gray zone.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and this is not a legal opinion, we need to check the case, the concrete case, but only the marketing should not be the should not be considered at first a crypto activity in Brazil. But there are controversies. For instance, when we talk about banking activities, this was considered on the case law of the uh, Brazilian National Financial System Council of Appeals, when we have only the marketing of banking products in Brazil, this was considered in the past banking activities, and it would entail a license, or at least that you have an intermediary in Brazil, because you are people are investing abroad due to this marketing. So you are turning investments to abroad due to this marketing.
So I mean, the logical extension of that is, will liquidity be pushed offshore?
Yes, yes, yes. Because if we see the typical activity of a financial institution taking a banking activity is to intermediate funds from one side to another, from passive operations to active operations. So if you're doing that in Brazil, would be very similar to, but the difference is that the active transactions would be abroad. So there was some case law in this sense, but yes, something to be discussed with the central bank.
Okay. I mean, we're getting towards the end of our time. So, I mean, just to sum up, I mean, do you, looking at what's happening, we're talking about there's a, you know, there's going to be a degree of rationalization. We're going to see consumer protection safeguards in place. I mean, do you also think there will be a requirement for additional investment in technology in order to actively work between fiat liquidity into stable coin liquidity, um, and orchestrate between the different currencies? Do you see further cost involved in this area? I know it's not necessarily your area of expertise, but your opinion there.
Yes, as a regulatory lawyer, of course, I'm not an expert in technology, but I think yes, even if you think from the perspective of the compliance with the regulation, or even if we think when we talk about, for instance, the FX transactions with stablecoins. Before the regulation, you could just perform the payment transaction without any regulation. So it was outside the scope of the central bank, and it was being done in a regulated basis. Now you need to align this with all the regulatory aspects that are also applicable in its great part to through traditional FX transactions. So the registrations with the central bank, the contracts, so the documentation that will need to be made available to the central bank. We have the cybersecurity aspect. We have the custody aspects. Now there will be high standards because the monitoring of the transactions, because of the that's a very interesting question. I think a point to elaborate in this final minutes. We have in Brazil since many years, an approach in regulation in general, which is called RBA, so the risk-based approach. So when you check the money laundering regulation, we see the circular of the central bank. It's about to be updated soon, but it's basically the same regulation applicable to Bradesco, to Itaú, the biggest banks, and to the smallest of the payment institutions. So how could it be? It can be because the idea is that you establish your parameters, your criteria, and your controls based on the risk of your operations and your profile and your size. Having said that, if we see how the problems of monitoring and reporting all the transactions to the central bank related to crypto, I think, in my opinion, not being an expert, I think it's important to make this disclaimer that for those players that are not already adapted, because some big players in crypto already have these in place, there will be a very technology intense investment to comply with these regulation properly.
Cool, excellent. Well, I mean, we've got just a few minutes left until our time is up, so I think that's about wraps it up from my point of view. I'm very grateful to you, Pedro, for your time, for sharing such thoughtful and insightful and forward-looking perspectives, and giving us your opinions. I also apologize if anybody can hear a dog barking in the background. Unfortunately, that's me.
I didn't notice until you talk about it.
Oh, okay. I should have shut up.
You called the attention.
Yeah, no. Anyway, no. I mean, seriously, thanks. I really appreciate it. Just formally to wrap everything up. Thank you very much to the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce in Great Britain and our chair, Vera, who so kindly took time out to introduce our webinar. Our mission at the Chamber of Commerce is about communicating about what's happening, developing bilateral opportunities between our countries, and giving people insights into Brazilian market and the Brazilian market trends. So that's thank you very much for helping us out with that. Thank you also to Lena, who always arranges these things so very kindly at the chamber. And also thank you to our audience for taking the time out and listening and hopefully learn something. Again, Pedro, I know, we meet up frequently, we talk frequently, there are lots of things that we're going on. Anybody who needs to know something about financial services regulation in Brazil, you're the guy to talk to. As I mentioned, you're an author of a book on open finance in Brazil. We've been working together for many years, and indeed, you've been involved in this business for even longer. So you're a great opportunity, a great person to talk to about this. So if anybody on the call needs to ask more questions, obviously, we'd like to put you in touch if that's possible. But that's it, really. Thank you all for being with us today. It's been most enjoyable talking to you, and I hope that everybody has learned as much as I have. I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you very much, everyone else.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.